The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the program. It is stunning how the news is just nonstop. The last 48 hours, just breaking story after breaking story. And at the top of the list, at least among other stories, is this revelation from acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe that the FBI investigation into Trump-Russia collusion is going to continue, and that the FBI will not be keeping the White House informed as to the progress of that, which if you're Donald Trump and you made this haphazard move to fire FBI Director James Comey last week, apparently, by any reasonable analysis, to attempt to interrupt the Trump-Russia investigation, you've got to be losing your you-know-what in the Oval Office, and we'll get to that a little bit. James Comey, of course, fired FBI director, fired last week by President Donald Trump. The reason that was given, the mishandling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation, completely unbelievable. I don't know anybody other than the most extreme committed ideologues or Trumpists that believe that explanation. Comey replaced by Andrew McCabe as acting head of the FBI. Comey was going to testify last Thursday. That didn't happen because of the firing. So we immediately asked the question, what does this firing do to the progress or to the path forward of the FBI's Trump-Russia investigation? Because clearly it immediately had the impact of changing James Comey's status as the FBI director who's about to testify to the former FBI director who is no longer going to testify. We did learn that James Comey may still testify as a private citizen. He's been asked to testify, and we'll see if that ultimately happens. But a major question was what happens to the investigation? And the answer is, according to the head of the FBI, the acting head of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, the agency will continue to investigate alleged links between Russia and Donald Trump's campaign, but they will not routinely update the White House about the progress of that investigation. And to that, my reaction is, number one, great. And number two, why was the FBI regularly updating the White House about the progress of that investigation when the White House was the entity being investigated? So that's a major concern, and that's not being discussed nearly as much as I expected. It's been 72 hours since this news broke at this point. And the obvious question to me is, why would you update the investigation? Why would you update the White House about this investigation? This is one of the criticisms that was made of Devin Nunes, the Republican congressman who was running the House House investigation into Trump-Russia. Why was he criticized for running to the White House to talk about what they had, but nobody is saying, hey, wait, Andrew, you're saying you're no longer going to update the White House about the investigation. Why were you ever updating the White House about the investigation? So in any case, Andrew McCabe saying that the firing of James Comey is not going to impact the investigation at all. And one of the more interesting things from Andrew McCabe's testimony was to defend the firing of James Comey. The White House said that the 56-year-old FBI director had lost the confidence of the majority of the sort of rank and file members of the FBI. Andrew McCabe said, yeah, no, that completely rejected that notion, saying the FBI rank and file liked James Comey and had the full confidence. They had full confidence in James Comey. So that talking point absolutely destroyed. We had another talking point within hours of President Trump's firing of James Comey last week. We had White House Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders say that James Comey had committed, quote, atrocities during the investigation. investigation into Trump Russia. That's absolutely bogus. Andrew McCabe destroying the White House talking points on that as well, emphasizing that James Comey was very well liked in terms of how he was handling the investigation, and that investigation would continue. Any day now, are we going to hear that Donald Trump has lost confidence in Andrew McCabe, which is, of course, a predecessor to firing? Can you just imagine for a second the temper tantrum that must be happening at the White House? Did Donald Trump really think that firing James Comey was going to make the entire Trump-Russia investigation go away? I'm increasingly convinced that Trump's latest actions on this have, if anything, accelerated the entire Trump-Russia thing rather than stonewalling it, which is probably what Donald Trump sought to do. Meanwhile, Russians were hanging out in the Oval Office. Russian media covered it. American media not allowed in. I'll tell you more about that later, but everything falling apart on this for Donald Trump. Speaking of the supposed conversations that took place between fired FBI Director James Comey and Donald Trump, of course, the backstory being that last week James Comey was fired by Donald Trump. The letter from Donald Trump explaining the firing references James Comey supposedly telling Donald Trump 3 times that he wasn't under investigation. This is a very bizarre thing to include in the letter. It's also apparently untrue. More on that later. Very strange tweet from Donald Trump about this entire thing on Friday, where he tweeted, quote, "James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press." This could be understood in 2 different ways. Number one is Donald Trump here is basically threatening James Comey for basically saying, I secretly recorded our meetings and conversations. And if James Comey is going to come out and say anything that might not be accurate about what was or wasn't said in those meetings, he had better think twice, because Donald Trump has it on tape, and that Comey had better be careful. The other interpretation would be Trump is implying that if James Comey secretly recorded FBI investigations, he'd better be careful if he's going to try to leak those recordings. Now, I would find it absolutely shocking if James Comey was the one recording a conversation in the White House. The idea that the FBI director would secretly bring in recording devices to the White House to record his meeting with the president, I have a very hard time believing that. More likely is that if there are any recordings of that meeting between James Comey and Donald Trump, that it was Trump who actually did the recording, because Trump, according to to employees of Trump's former job, which was running the Trump Organization, Donald Trump supposedly did sometimes secretly record conversations with employees. What we do know is that current and former FBI officials dispute the characterization from Donald Trump of that meeting with James Comey from earlier this year. Trump, in an interview with NBC on Thursday, said Comey requested the meeting with Trump, during which Trump asked Comey if he wanted to stay on as head of the FBI. Officials have said to NBC, no, James Comey didn't request that meeting. It was the White House that requested that meeting. That's sort of a basic factual misstatement of what the circumstances of the meeting were. And then a former senior official also said that James Comey, whether or not Trump was under investigation specifically, James Comey never would have specifically said to the president, "You're not under investigation." Also, 2 people who heard of James Comey's account of the meeting told the New York Times that Donald Trump allegedly asked James Comey to pledge political loyalty to Trump, and Comey reportedly said, "I promise honesty, but not loyalty," which corroborates the more general consensus about James Comey. And again, it goes back against the characterization of Trump. But although no one believes that it's Comey who might have recorded that meeting, maybe Trump did. In any case, If there are recordings of that meeting, senior House Democrats have now demanded that Donald Trump turn them over. Congressman John Conyers and Elijah Cummings, the top Democrats on the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees, wrote to White House counsel Don McGahn asking whether such tapes exist and requesting copies if they do. Congressman Adam Schiff, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, issued a statement saying that Trump must either provide tapes to Congress or admit that he made them up. And I read that and thought, admit he made them up. Trump will admit he made up the existence of these tapes, possible existence of these tapes, if they don't exist. As soon as he admits that he made up the assertion that 3 to 5 million people voted illegally for Hillary Clinton, as soon as he admits that he made up the claim that he had record inauguration attendance, as soon as he admits that he made up the claim that Obama wiretapped him and the claim that he'll build a wall with Mexico that Mexico will pay for and that everyone will be covered under his replacement to Obamacare, I could go on. As soon as he admits that he made up all those things, maybe he would admit that he made up the possible existence of these tapes. How wacky is this, though? Because it is yet another Nixon connection. Last week, after James Comey was fired, I said, this is sort of reminiscent of the Saturday Night Massacre involving Richard Nixon and Archibald Cox in the Watergate scandal. We know how that ended. And here's yet another connection to Watergate with the tapes. In 1973, Alexander Butterfield was testifying before Congress and answered some minor question, sort of offhandedly, about checking the tapes. The question everybody had in response was, wait a second, what tapes are you talking about? That's what started the revelation that there were recordings in the Oval Office that, of course, ultimately led to a massive legal fight. Those tapes were subpoenaed and ultimately led to Richard Nixon's resignation. Things certainly don't appear to be calming down anytime soon as far as that investigation goes. Send me your thoughts about this. I'm on Twitter at dpacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show. We'll take a break and be back with much more right after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Lee Carlson. Lee, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. We are viewer and listener supported media. I will update you about the YouTube ad boycott a little later in the show. It's been a couple weeks since we talked about that. Needless to say, Lee, thank you for supporting the work that we do. You can join Lee by becoming a member at davidpakman.com/membership. You can also make a pledge of even just $1 or $2 per month at patreon.com/davidpakmanshow. And if you ever shop on Amazon, type in davidpakman.com/Amazon into your browser, and then any shopping you do will support the work that we do. Also, our friend Greg Stevens, longtime supporter of the show, he has a great documentary film that he's working on talking about globalization, jobs, trade, agriculture, and so much more through the lens of coffee. And they are doing a crowdfunding campaign, and I would love for you to check it out. And if the project appeals to you, you can make a contribution. You can check out the trailer at loveinthetimeofcoffee.com. Let's talk about Donald Trump's income. A very, very strange statement made by Donald Trump's lawyers over the weekend. President Donald Trump's lawyers now say that in looking at the last 10 years of tax returns, there are no forms of income of any type from Russian sources, with some exceptions, which, based on my understanding of the English language, means that there are Russian income sources on Donald Trump's tax returns over the last 10 years. This is sort of like saying, I've never killed anyone in my life, with some exceptions, which means you have killed some people in your life. The letter says there's no equity investment by Russians in entities controlled by Donald Trump or debt owed by Donald Trump to Russian lenders, but that it does reflect income from the 2013 Miss Universe pageant, which was held in Moscow, as well as a property sold to a Russian billionaire in 2008 for $95 million. So no Russian income other than, $100 million or so dollars. Some exceptions, as Donald Trump's lawyers are calling them. The White House is saying Trump went to his lawyers and asked for this letter after a request from Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, who heads one of the congressional committees investigating Russian interference in the election. This is just so bizarre to me. If they're commenting about what is in the tax returns, does that mean that the tax returns are no longer being audited? Which Donald Trump said, as soon as the audits are done, I'll release the tax returns. Or are we going to forget about that and just continue to take Donny Boy at his word? It's sort of an odd release, first of all, because it does make Donald Trump look very defensive, because it's very strange wording. Absolutely no Russian income with about $100 million in exceptions. Secondly, it's calling attention to the reality that Donald Trump never released his tax returns, which is something nearly 3/4 of Americans want to see. With some exceptions is a nice line. Donald Trump is making America great again with some exceptions. I kind of like that. The timing of it is weird. And one thing that occurred to me is maybe preempting some future article that is going to be a blockbuster with regard to Donald Trump's Russian revenues or liabilities or debts or whatever the case may be. It's also yet another thing to look at, and this has mentioned before, it's not new. That $95 million condo that Donald Trump sold to a Russian oligarch, it's pretty sketchy because it was purchased for just $40 million a few years before. What was done to more than double the value of it? That method of selling a property for way more than it appears maybe to be worth, that is a ripe method for money laundering. And this letter only raises suspicions. And we've heard such conflicting statements from Trump and his kids over the last 10 years about how much business do they do with Russia, that this all stinks. And I would not be surprised if this is trying to preempt some really damaging release that we're going to be seeing, could be days, could be weeks or months from now. The White House is apparently furious that Russia trolled them in the Oval Office just on Wednesday, right? The day after Donald Trump fired FBI Director James Comey, Donald Trump held a somewhat secretive meeting in the Oval Office with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov and Russia's ambassador to the US Sergey Kislyak. Now, if those names sound familiar to you, they should. And that's why the optics of the meeting are a disaster. I'll get into the specifics in a second, but the optics are a disaster. The day after firing the person in charge of the FBI's investigation into Donald Trump's connections to Russia, you invite to the White House some of the Russians specifically involved in the undisclosed meetings of your own White House's staff. So that's really, really sketchy. But then they have this meeting, and the White House doesn't allow American reporters in the Oval Office to cover the meeting, before the meeting or after the meeting, but Russian media is allowed to cover the meeting. This was the day after Trump fired Comey. Like I said, one of the people at the meeting is Russian Ambassador Sergey Kislyak, whose meetings with Trump surrogates are part of the investigation that's taking place. Kislyak met with Jeff Sessions, met with campaign advisor Carter Page, met with disgraced and shamed former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, met with Trump's son-in-law and current advisor Jared Kushner. Multiple officials from the U.S. intelligence community have said that Sergey Kislyak is widely considered to be a spy. So the White House invites him to the Oval Office, Sergey Kislyak, ignores security concerns of inviting a widely suspected Russian spy into the Oval Office, but then only allows Russian media to cover the meeting. I'm saying this facetiously, but maybe we should start trusting the White House a little more. They clearly don't care about looking corrupt, because the day after firing James Comey, they have suspected Russian spies in the Oval Office and only allow Russian media to photograph it, maybe there's nothing to see there because they clearly aren't trying to cover up the obvious sketchy activities. Not only did the White House refuse to let American media cover this meeting between Donald Trump and top Russian officials, the White House became enraged when state media from Russia who were invited started publishing the pictures that they took of the meeting. Let's take a look at first a tweet here where you will see the pictures published. This is one of the pictures that was taken in the Oval Office. Donald Trump, I believe that's Sergey Lavrov there. And then an anonymous White House official is quoted as having saying, "They tricked us. That's the problem with the Russians. They lie." The American press was allowed to photograph Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov after their meeting, and Russian state media proudly tweeted a video of Lavrov being condescending and sarcastic to the American press about Comey's firing. Here's the tweet where Sergey Lavrov was FBI Director James Comey fired? You're kidding, pretending not to have heard of that. Here is the video of that. Take a look and a listen at this.
Thank you.
Does the Comey firing cast a shadow of your talks, gentlemen?
Was he fired?
Yes.
You are kidding. You are kidding.
Yes, fired. What about Russian?
Yeah. So this is like last month when Lavrov started talking down to NBC News correspondent Andrea Mitchell saying, "Where are your manners? Who raised you?" etc. It is so obvious that Russian government officials are just cocky and dismissive towards the press and don't take them seriously because the totally corrupt Russian government isn't held accountable by the press in the way that the US government is held accountable. And it's sort of rubbing off, I guess I would say, on the Trump administration. They've adopted many of the same Russian attitudes and tactics when it comes to dealing with the press, making it harder for people to contact the White House. We've covered that. Refusing to answer questions at press briefings. I've told you about Sean Spicer leaving a press briefing without taking any questions, calling news outlets they don't like fake news, not inviting American press to important meetings like this one in the Oval Office. It's rubbing off on the White House, and it is very, very scary. One of the many important federal government positions that Donald Trump has failed to fill in a timely manner is that of head of scientific research at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA. According to a leak, Donald Trump has finally selected someone from the job, but the bad news is who has been selected. Under the 2008 Farm Act, the head of the USDA research arm is supposed to be the sort of head scientist for the agency, chosen from, quote, among distinguished scientists who specialized or have significant experience in agricultural research, education, and economics. A good credential to be selected to be the head scientist in charge of research at the USDA would be to be a scientist. Trump has instead chosen right-wing, Christian fundamentalist radio host Sam Clovis for the job. Clovis is not a scientist in any sense, but he did go on television many times to defend Donald Trump during the campaign, so he's got that going for him. The USDA has this huge list of really important scientific responsibilities. They study and make policy on everything involving food safety, nutrition, farming, land conservation, and climate change. Climate change, by the way, right-wing radio host and Christian fundamentalist Sam Clovis also happens to be a climate change denier. He has called climate change, quote, simply a mechanism for transferring wealth from one group of people to another. Clovis's educational background is business and foreign policy. He has no experience in or education in food safety or agriculture or nutrition. He has never taken a graduate level course in any kind of science whatsoever. The head of science at the USDA is often consulted on major scientific issues. For example, like during the Obama administration, the lead researcher at the USDA was in charge of advising the rest of the government on Ebola and Zika. How is a guy who has never taken a graduate level science class and has credentials in business and being a Christian fundamentalist going to advise the government on how to deal with Ebola or Zika? Just as a reference point, the person that Barack Obama appointed to this job was a PhD scientist who had previously served as the chairman of the Food and Nutrition Board at the Institute of Medicine, which is part of the National Academy of Sciences. Left-wingers who are educated, it's all a big conspiracy to indoctrinate our kids. College is just a left-wing indoctrination center. Clovis is also the person who introduced the Trump campaign to Carter Page, who is one of the most implicated people in the Trump-Russia scandal as far as the public knows. Does any of this surprise us anymore? Is this the new normal? I sort of feel like I've become desensitized to these kinds of appointments and these kinds of decisions in general. And of course, this is exactly who you would expect Donald Trump to choose to lead the USDA scientific division. You'll see some right-wingers online saying, oh, this is really good. Trump's draining the swamp. He's not doing the establishment thing. Breaking news, folks. Instead of draining the swamp by hiring non-scientists to science positions, what about draining the swamp by cutting down on the lobbyists and the financial industry cronies in your administration instead of putting non-scientists in science positions? Maybe that's a little crazy. And as we know, Donald Trump has filled the swamp. He hasn't drained it. The only non-establishment picks have been drastically, disturbingly underqualified people to positions where you're supposed to have actual credentials. And I know a lot of people on our Reddit discussion forum are very, very concerned about this, understandably. You can join the Reddit discussion forum and participate in this and other conversations at davidpakman.com/REDDIT.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome back to the show. I do want to update you on what's going on with the YouTube advertiser boycott, known as YouTube Adpocalypse now, colloquially. It's been a while since I've talked about this, and we're sort of getting to the point of figuring out what the permanent situation will be, and it's really not good, okay? The backstory is that on March 31st, instantly, we lost 99% of our YouTube revenue, which in and of itself represented about half of the revenue for our program, okay? The reason for this was that some ads showed up on racist videos. They were screenshotted by a couple of different news outlets, including the Wall Street Journal. Huge deal was made over it. Wow, YouTube can't control where ads are showing up. Now, the problem was that the article suggested that YouTube's ad algorithm was too lax. The reality was the opposite, that videos, for example, advocating against anti-Semitism were seen as the same as anti-Semitic videos by the YouTube ad algorithm. It was a too strict algorithm. So again, trying to solve a problem that didn't exist. We lost 99% of our revenue as a result because anything we do could be interpreted as sort of controversial, right? When we talk about Russia or ISIS or whatever, if you have a view that anytime someone talks about ISIS, it's basically the same as ISIS propaganda, even if you're talking about a strategy to defeat ISIS, then you're going to lose ad revenue on that basis. And that's what happened. We lost 99% of our ad revenue. That was March 31st. April 11th, for a couple days, it popped back up to about 15% of the revenue we had been experiencing. Then on April 13th, back down to almost nothing. Mid to late April, I think it was April 18th or 19th, a New York Times article came out about what was going on with our channel, and nothing happened. At the end of April, we started seeing a little bit of an uptick, and right now we're basically in a more permanent, stable state where we are earning a third of what we were earning before. We've lost about 2/3 of our YouTube revenue. And it appears as though that is going to be more or less permanent. Our situation is we're getting about 2/3 the number of ads that we used to have. And each one of those ads is paying about half of what it used to pay. 2/3 the ads, each pays half. That means we are right at about 1/3 of the revenue we used to earn. Unfortunately, we've been sort of waiting around for this to self-correct. Unfortunately, there's a new article on tubefilter.com. It's a website that publishes news about platforms like YouTube, and they are basically saying, this is it. Quote from that article: "The big picture trends in the digital video business, plus the changes to YouTube's algorithm we saw last year, point to something far larger and potentially permanent. The old YouTube is not coming back because YouTube is no longer interested in just being YouTube, featuring and catering to its homegrown creators of the past decade. The future of YouTube is YouTube TV, and to a lesser degree, YouTube Red. And the future is suddenly now. Yet this trend is bigger than just YouTube. None of the large public company digital video platforms are interested in focusing on individuals' digital creators anymore. All of them are moving up market to focus on TV or on TV-like content with longer formats and more advertiser-friendly subject matter. This is happening right at the same time that the larger media companies are unbundling their content and looking to broadcast on mobile and the web. These moves show no signs of ending or reversing, and in fact, they follow well-known patterns in the business world." It's bad. And sadly, I don't even want to do this now, but I'll mention it. We're probably going to lose our Amazon affiliate revenue as well. I don't want to dig into that too much, but just Google what's been happening to similar creators with their ad revenue on, or their affiliate revenue on Amazon. This is huge for us. I mean, this is really, really bad for us. And I've not been talking about this to try to not fatigue people in the audience, but I'm sort of I have no choice now but to come to you and say, this is permanent and we need your help, okay? So there's a few things you can do. Number one, membership. Membership is huge. You can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. You get the bonus show. You get a commercial-free audio and video stream of the show just for our members and lots of great things. But you also are supporting our work, okay? davidpakman.com/membership. We have a coupon code available that'll save you 40%. That coupon code is IVoted17, okay? Please sign up for membership. We're talking about only a few dollars a month. Number two, Patreon, okay? Patreon is simpler than membership. You just make a pledge of any amount you want. We've got just over 1,500 patrons right now. You go to patreon.com/davidpakmanshow. We estimated we were making 30 to 50 cents for each viewer that was watching all 160 of our monthly videos. If you pledge just $1, you can replace that lost revenue. And if we can get a few more thousand people to do that, we're at 1,500 right now, we will actually make up for all of the lost YouTube revenue. So please do that. I already mentioned if you shop on Amazon, davidpakman.com/Amazon. If you have YouTube Red, watch our videos. We will get a slice of that YouTube Red fee. And number five, you can get David Pakman Show gear, coffee, bumper stickers, t-shirts, hoodies at davidpakman.com/gear. The good news is the Patreon donors are accumulating. As you can see, we are beyond 1,500 patrons there. I don't care what you donate. This is a cumulative process. Even if you can only donate $1 a month, please do it, because if everybody does it, then we will fix this problem and actually come out ahead and way more independent than we ever were. And the good news about membership is that people are signing up. You can go to davidpakman.com/membership. You can select a monthly or yearly membership. Click on the red sign up button. Then you can enter the coupon code IVoted17 on the second page of the sign up, and that will save you 40%. And by the way, we are still doing the targeted Patreon goal if and when we get to 2,000 patrons. And I think it's a matter of when, not if. I hope anyway. We're under 500 patrons away. I will do an entire show in studio with my hair similar to what we're showing our TV and YouTube audience right now. This is what happens when I put no product in my hair. It's a scary sight for many. It may not be a kid-friendly show because it's the stuff of nightmares from what I'm being told. But I will do an entire show in studio with my hair like this. And if you don't care about that, don't worry about it. We are just trying to build a base of support. And you can do that at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. I'm going to try to sporadically check in with you about this. I can't mention it every day. I get that. People will get fatigued. But this is a big hit. This is a big hit for us. And as a result, I do need to, on some semi-regular basis, remind you that things have changed on our end financially, and we do need your support. Really funny moment on Fox News, and I actually am going to defend Griff Jenkins, sort of. Griff Jenkins is a guy at Fox News that I've never seen him do anything particularly interesting. And one of the things that he sometimes does is he goes out in public and talks to people about what they're thinking on politics. And okay, we could sort of debate the value of that. What he did recently was he was out at the Tasty Diner in Bethesda, Maryland. And this was shortly after Donald Trump fired FBI Director James Comey. Of course, Donald Trump didn't say it was because he wanted to try to interrupt the Trump-Russia investigation, but we can all sort of read into that at least that seems to have played a factor. Griff Jenkins goes over to this guy at this diner in Bethesda, Maryland, and the timing of it is hilarious because as soon as the guy mentions maybe the investigation was getting too close to figuring out what happened with Putin, the interview is ended seemingly abruptly. But I am actually going to defend Griff Jenkins, okay? This video has gone viral. Let's take a look at the video first.
Bottom line, Pat, what do you make of the firing? Thumbs up or thumbs down on that decision?
Well, I think it should have been done much earlier. I think to be too Machiavellian about it, why does it take such a long time for these guys to arrive at this conclusion? Is it because we're getting too tight, finding out too much information about the Putin? Is that?
Well, thank you. We're getting tight on time. I just wanted to tell you, too, we're going to be talking to folks here. Steve Krasner, he's actually staying around.
Yeah, whoa, Putin, what? We're tight on time. Let's go talk to this other guy here in a different part of the restaurant. You can sort of imagine the producer in Griff Jenkins' ear saying, abort, abort, walk away from that man. The reality is, and I don't want to defend Fox News. I don't want to go out of my way to defend Fox News, but this video has gone so viral that I do want to mention that these segments are pretty tightly timed, and more than likely this segment was ending anyway at that point. And Griff Jenkins actually commented on this on Twitter in response to Liz Power One, who tweeted about this video, saying, Liz, I always open to criticism, but in fairness, I only had 2.5 minutes for the entire segment and gave all but 5 to 10 seconds to him. Not a fair attack. And I think that that's probably true. What is the point of these segments? Does anyone really believe that this is a completely representative cross-section of what people think about any particular issue? I don't know. I mean, obviously, in some sense it is. It is a guy who has an opinion. I don't know how much we glean from these types of interviews. Once it actually turned out Fox News did this, and they were interviewing some producer or an employee of some kind of Fox News as a random voice on the street, and no disclosure was given whatsoever. But that aside, I was curious with this issue of the James Comey firing. What narrative is Fox News taking on it? How can they cover the Comey thing without talking about the Trump-Russia part of the story? And they're basically just pretending everything's fine. Since the inauguration, there's been this general attitude, with a few exceptions. Everything's fine. Liberals are only mad at Trump because he's a conservative. It's not clear he's a conservative. He seems to be an authoritarian more than anything, and just pretending like everything's fine and dandy. And we've done prior reports about how acutely underinformed primary Fox News viewers are. If you're only watching Fox News right now, you may not have any sense that this is an administration that in its first nearly 4 months has been riddled in more scandals than the Obama administration had over an entire 8 years. Some of those scandals, non-scandals whatsoever, like Obama wore a light-colored suit when talking about something serious. Your perception of reality could, as a result of mostly getting your news from Fox News, could not possibly be more skewed than it is right now. Make sure to sign up, davidpakman.com/membership, patreon.com/davidpakmanshow. We're doing what we can to make up for a 66% loss in ad revenue as a result of YouTube adpocalypse. And every single person that signs up is really helping to undo the damage that has been done by many big corporate dollars being pulled out of YouTube. And we appreciate everybody that signed up or pledged in the last month or so.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
In February in Charlottesville, Virginia, the city council voted to remove a 93-year-old statue of Confederate Civil War General Robert E. Lee from a public park. Then they also voted to rename the park, which is currently called Lee Park, the Confederate general. We've actually seen this across the country, right? Changing the names of schools named after racists, changing street names, and removing statues. We've seen this trend in the U.S. over the last few years. Charlottesville is best known for being the home of the University of Virginia, and I believe this was a good move by the city council. This is the 21st century. We've been talking on the show lately, ever since Donald Trump's ignorant and confused statements about the Civil War. We've been talking about how many people in the South have been, to put it charitably, slow to acknowledge that the Civil War was fought over slavery, and that glorifying and eulogizing the Confederacy is sort of affirming slavery and racism, whether people want to admit it or not. Now, remembering history and educating people about the past in history books and in museums, that's one thing, and I am obviously in favor of that. But celebrating and sort of fondly remembering the Confederacy is ignorant and it's disrespectful, to say the least. The statue is still scheduled to be removed. It hasn't been removed yet. So Saturday night in Charlottesville, in the park where this statue has been for many years, a flock of dozens of neo-Nazis, white nationalists, racist, members of the alt-right, call them whatever you want, they gathered around the statue to protest the removal of the statue, and they were holding torches. To add another wrinkle to the story, the protest was led by none other than Richard Spencer, the white separatist, white supremacist, sort of neo-Nazi guy who coined the term alt-right. We recently actually interviewed him on the program. The swarm of people at the park were chanting Nazi slogans about ethnic purity and also, and this is just getting weird, chanting Russia is our friend. Here's the even more hilarious part. These folks would love for you to think of them as these hardcore outlaw activists that are willing to push the envelope and do anything for their cause. 10 minutes after their small protest started, the cops showed up, told them, put your torches away and go home. And they immediately did so. The police scared them, so they just gave up and left. And of course, the counter would be, well, these are law-abiding citizens. But the entire thing was just bizarre when you saw the way it went down. Charlottesville Mayor Mark Signer said in a statement, quote, "This event involving torches at night in Lee Park was either profoundly ignorant or designed to instill fear in our minority populations in a way that harkens back to the days of the KKK. Reality is that it was sort of both, right? I mean, the demonstration was ignorant and intended to be racist, and I'm glad that it stopped after not very long. But these guys wanted to instill fear, although I guess you could say they failed. They were trying to be dramatic with the torches, but then they put the torches out and left the scene as soon as the cops showed up. What kind of revolutionaries are they claiming to be? This must have been immensely embarrassing for them. And the torches seem kind of silly in a way, just kind of meant for theatrics. This is what a torch looks like for people who are watching on TV or on YouTube with us. And from what I can tell by this photo, it looks like a lot of them are kind of holding those tiki candles that people put in their backyard. Just very, very strange optics around the entire thing. We've known for a long time that the building of the Keystone XL and Dakota Access pipelines are terrible ideas. And yet, nevertheless, Donald Trump issued executive orders to try to hurry their construction, which has been pretty embarrassing on the world stage. It also violates agreements made by the federal government and Native Americans. It's also outdated energy technology. There's also a lower and lower demand for crude energy. It would contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. The pipelines would not really create too many permanent jobs, the way Donald Trump likes to say. But one of the biggest criticisms of the Dakota Access Pipeline, especially from people living close to the pipeline, where the pipeline would be built, is the environmental impact on land and on water in the surrounding area. And in the particular case of the Dakota Access Pipeline, we've recently learned that the nearly $4 billion oil pipeline, before even being completed, has already been leaking oil. You've probably not heard that it's been leaking oil in corporate media. It didn't leak a lot of oil, but it hasn't yet been completed. This is not some abstract concern about what problems might the pipeline cause in the future. It's a reality now. We've found out that last month, the Dakota Access Pipeline had its first spill, 84 gallons of liquid petroleum into the surrounding environment. Now, yes, 84 gallons is very, very little. I get that. But it's already leaking, and it hasn't even been completed yet. The pipeline is nearing completion, and they've now begun loading oil into it in preparation for it becoming fully operational. Jan Hasselman, a lawyer for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe who has been protesting the pipeline's construction, said, quote, "They keep telling everybody that it is state of the art, that leaks won't happen, that nothing can go wrong. It's always been false. They haven't even turned the thing on, and it's shown to be false." And of course, disclosure and honesty is kind of part of the problem here. Neither the company building the pipeline nor any government informed the public about this spill right after it happened. So we found out about it a month later. So there are questions about transparency when it comes to future spills, obviously. The state is only required to notify the public if there's a spill that imminently risks public health. And the obvious question is, well, according to whose opinion? Hasselman also added, quote, "It doesn't give us any pleasure to say I told you so, but we have said from the beginning that it's not a matter of if but when pipelines leak and they spill. It's just what happens." Standing Rock Sioux Tribe Chairman Dave Archambault said, quote, "Our lawsuit challenging this dangerous project is ongoing, and it's more important than ever for the court to step in and halt additional accidents before they happen, not just for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and our resources, but for the 17 million people whose drinking water is at risk." The United States is not even benefiting from this pipeline. We're talking about a foreign company using our natural resources for oil that is disproportionately going to go and be consumed by people in other countries. The risks clearly outweigh even the best possible potential benefits here. And I will remind you, never far behind with Trump is a potential conflict of interest. Donald Trump was, at least at one point, financially connected to the company that owns or will own the completed pipeline. We have no real evidence that Trump has severed those financial ties, other than some advisor at some point saying that Donald Trump has figured out how to stop the conflicts of interest or whatever, which quite frankly means nothing to me. I mean, it's worth basically dog crap. It's of absolutely no value to us whatsoever. We've got a voicemail number. That number is 2192-DAVID-P. Really funny voicemail. And the voicemail gets cut off, okay? But I want to try to figure out, where was this voicemail going before it was cut off? I think you'll understand once you hear it.
Hi, David. This is Xavier from Colorado. I just want to express to you why it is so important for us to legalize ranch.
And then it goes silent and lasts about another 45 seconds, during, I assume, which the caller was talking, but it didn't come through. Legalize ranch. Are they talking about legalizing ranch dressing? Are they talking about legalizing some kind of ranching in some state? I have absolutely no idea where this could have been going. And it's disappointing that it was cut off when it did. We need to talk about legalizing ranch. I genuinely have no clue what that could be. So if you have a sense, please get in touch and let me know. And if you're the caller, please call back, because that's all we got. And I know that you were on the phone another 45 or 50 seconds, and the rest of it didn't come through. So call back in, and we will absolutely follow up on it. On today's bonus show, some states allow using sunscreen at school without a doctor's permission. Is that controversial? In some ways, apparently it is, and we're going to talk about it on the bonus show. Number 2, India is making history by employing transgender people in government jobs. Why is this historic? What is the broader situation in which transgender people are living in India? We will talk about that on the bonus show. And also, you've heard of alt-right. You've heard of regressive left. You've probably heard of cuck. Have you heard of the white left? The white left is a very popular insult that is used on Chinese forums, on the internet, among Chinese users. We will talk about what it means. We will talk about why it is being used and why it's been popularized on today's bonus show. How do you get the bonus show? The bonus show is a daily program. It's an extra show. In addition to our broadcast show, we do the bonus show every day for our paid members. So to access the bonus show and all of the other member benefits, you go to davidpakman.com/membership. If you want a discount, by all means, take the discount by using the coupon code IVoted17. And you can also make a pledge of any amount. Even $1 a month helps to defray the lost revenue due to the YouTube adpocalypse problem we're dealing with. You can make a pledge at patreon.com/DavidPakman Show. We'll speak to you on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.